At 60 years old, nearly half of all Americans have diabetes or prediabetes, yet 90% don't even know they're walking a tightrope with their blood sugar. Here's what they don't tell you about diabetes after 60. The medical establishment wants you managing diabetes, not reversing it, because there's no money in a cure. But buried in the research from major medical centers are 5 breakthrough methods that can start turning your numbers around in as little as 24 hours. Some of these will shock you, especially number 2, which goes against everything your doctor probably told you about eating. And number 1? It's so simple you'll wonder why no one ever mentioned it. Yet it can drop your morning glucose readings by 30 to 40 points in just 1 week. Before we dive in, I'm curious about where you're watching from and how long you've been dealing with blood sugar issues. Drop a comment and let me know your current age and what state or country you're in. It helps me understand who I'm talking to. Now let's start with number 5 and work our way up to the most powerful intervention that could change everything for you overnight. These aren't band-aids or temporary fixes. These are fundamental shifts that address why your body stopped processing sugar properly in the first place. Number 5 might surprise you because it involves doing less, not more. Stop checking your blood sugar multiple times per day unless you're on insulin. Here's why this matters more than you think. Every time you prick your finger, you're reinforcing a victim mentality that keeps you trapped in the diabetes management mindset instead of the diabetes reversal mindset. Your body responds to stress, and constantly monitoring creates a psychological stress loop that actually raises cortisol, which raises blood sugar. It's a vicious cycle disguised as responsible. Care research from diabetes centers suggests that people who check their blood sugar more than twice daily without being on insulin often have worse outcomes than those who check less frequently. The reason is simple. They become obsessed with the numbers instead of focusing on the behaviors that actually change the numbers. Think of it like stepping on a scale 10 times a day when you're trying to lose weight. The scale doesn't make you lose weight. The behaviors do. Martha, 67, was a retired school principal from Ohio who checked her blood sugar 6 times a day. Her morning readings averaged 160, and she lived in constant anxiety about the next test. I suggested she check only once in the morning for 2 weeks and focus entirely on the other methods I'm about to share with you. Within 10 days, her morning readings dropped to 130, and more importantly, she felt calm and in control for the first time in years. The psychological shift was as powerful as the physical one. Here's your protocol. If you're not on insulin, check your blood sugar once per day, first thing in the morning before eating or drinking anything. That's it. Use that number as information, not judgment. Write it down, then put the meter away and focus on the actions that will improve tomorrow's number. If your doctor insists on more frequent testing, ask them why and what specific medical benefit it provides if you're not adjusting insulin doses. Often they can't give you a good answer. But here's where it gets interesting. The real power in reducing blood sugar monitoring isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Number 4 will change how you think about protein forever. Most people over 60 aren't eating nearly enough protein, and what they are eating isn't being absorbed properly. Low protein intake is directly linked to insulin resistance because your muscles need adequate amino acids to take up glucose from your bloodstream. Without enough protein, glucose has nowhere to go except to be stored as fat or circulate as high blood sugar. The mechanism is straightforward. Protein helps build and maintain muscle mass, and muscle tissue is your body's largest glucose disposal site. When you eat protein, especially at breakfast, it triggers the release of hormones that improve insulin sensitivity for hours afterward. Studies from major medical centers show that people who consume at least 30 grams of protein at breakfast have better glucose control throughout the entire day compared to those who eat typical high-carb breakfast foods. Here's what shocked me when I first learned this. The recommended daily protein intake for seniors is often too low for optimal glucose control. Most guidelines suggest about 50 grams per day for a sedentary older adult, but emerging research suggests that people reversing diabetes need closer to 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, which for a 160-pound person is about 73 grams per day. Robert, 72, was a former mechanic from Texas whose morning blood sugar hovered around 180. He was eating oatmeal for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch, and pasta for dinner. Classic high-carb, low-protein pattern. We shifted him to 3 eggs with spinach for breakfast, a large salad with grilled chicken for lunch, and salmon with vegetables for dinner. His protein intake went from about 40 grams per day to nearly 90 grams. Within 2 weeks, his morning readings dropped to 140, and he had more energy than he'd felt in years. Your protocol is specific. Aim for 25 to 30 grams of protein at each meal. That's about 4 eggs, or a palm-sized piece of meat, fish or poultry, or 1 cup of Greek yogurt. The key is spreading it throughout the day because your body can only process so much protein at once. If you're not used to eating this much protein, start gradually and increase by 5 grams per meal each week until you reach your target. Here's a simple test you can do right now. Think about what you ate yesterday and estimate your total protein intake. If it was less than 70 grams, you've found one major reason your blood sugar stays elevated. But protein alone isn't enough. You need the right timing, which brings us to our next breakthrough. Number 3 involves manipulating when you eat, not just what you eat, and the results can be dramatic within 48 hours. This is called time-restricted eating, but it's not what most people think. You're not starving yourself or doing extreme fasting. You're simply compressing your eating window to give your insulin system time to reset. When you eat constantly throughout the day, your insulin levels never get a chance to drop, which keeps your body in storage mode instead of fat-burning mode. The science behind this is elegant. After about 12 hours without food, your liver starts to deplete its stored glucose, called glycogen. Once glycogen drops, your body switches to burning fat for fuel, and your insulin sensitivity improves dramatically. Most people over 60 have been eating from morning until evening for decades, never allowing this metabolic switch to happen. They wonder why their blood sugar stays high and their weight keeps creeping up. Clinical studies from diabetes research centers show that people who compress their eating into an 8 to 10-hour window see significant improvements in morning glucose levels within 1 week. The key is consistency and choosing the right window for your lifestyle and circadian rhythm. Dorothy, 69, was a retired nurse from California whose blood sugar had been climbing for 3 years despite medication. Her morning readings were consistently over 170. She was eating breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6, and snacking until 9. That's a 14-hour eating window. We compressed her eating to between 11 in the morning and 7 at night, an 8-hour window. She kept her same foods initially, just changed the timing. Within 1 week, her morning blood sugar dropped to 150. Within 3 weeks, it was consistently under 140. The only change was when she ate, not what she ate. Here's your protocol. Choose either an 8-hour window like 11 to 7 or a 10-hour window like 9 to 7. The exact times matter less than consistency. Start your eating window at least 1 hour after waking and finish at least 3 hours before bed. If you take medication that requires food, work with your doctor to adjust timing safely. Most people find that starting later in the day works better than trying to finish eating early because evening social eating is harder to avoid. The beauty of time-restricted eating is that it works synergistically with proper protein intake. When you eat more protein in a compressed window, you feel fuller longer and don't experience the energy crashes that come from constant snacking. But timing alone isn't the whole picture. You need to address the hidden inflammation that's keeping your blood sugar elevated. Number 2 is going to contradict everything you've been told about healthy eating, but the research is undeniable. Many so-called superfoods are actually inflammatory for people over 60 with diabetes, and continuing to eat them is like putting sugar directly into your bloodstream. The biggest culprits are foods that have been marketed as healthy for decades, but contain compounds that interfere with glucose. Metabolism in aging bodies. Whole wheat bread is worse for your blood sugar than white bread in many cases because the wheat proteins in modern grain varieties trigger inflammatory responses that worsen insulin resistance. Oatmeal, even steel-cut oats, can spike blood sugar higher and longer than eating candy in people with compromised glucose metabolism. Fruit juices, even fresh squeezed, deliver massive glucose loads that overwhelm your system's ability to process sugar effectively. But here's the real kicker. Many vegetables that are considered healthy are actually problematic for diabetics over 60. Carrots, beets, parsnips, and sweet potatoes contain natural sugars and starches that convert to glucose rapidly. Even worse, many people eat them in large quantities thinking they're being healthy, not realizing they're sabotaging their blood sugar control. Research from major medical centers studying glycemic response shows that individual foods can affect blood sugar differently based on age, gut health, and existing insulin resistance. What's considered low glycemic for a healthy 30-year-old might be high glycemic for a 65-year-old with prediabetes. The standard glycemic index charts don't account for these variations, which is why following conventional dietary advice often fails for seniors. Frank, 71, was a former accountant from Florida who couldn't understand why his blood sugar stayed high despite eating what he thought was a healthy diet. Breakfast was steel-cut oats with banana and orange juice. Lunch was a turkey sandwich on whole wheat with carrots. Dinner was baked sweet potato with vegetables. His morning readings were consistently over 190. We eliminated all grains, root vegetables, and fruits except berries for 2 weeks. His morning readings dropped to 150 within 4 days and continued falling to 135 by day 14. He couldn't believe that foods he'd been told were healthy were actually making him sicker. Here's your elimination protocol. For 2 weeks, avoid all grains including wheat, oats, rice, and quinoa. Eliminate root vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, beets, and parsnips. Cut out all fruits except small portions of berries. No fruit juices or dried fruits. Instead, focus on above-ground vegetables, quality proteins, and healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, and nuts. Monitor your morning blood sugar daily during this period. Most people see dramatic improvements within 72 hours. The goal isn't to eliminate these foods forever, but to reset your system and identify which ones are problematic for your individual metabolism. After 2 weeks, you can reintroduce one food at a time and monitor how it affects your blood sugar. You might find that you can tolerate small amounts of some foods but not others. This personalized approach is far more effective than following generic dietary guidelines that don't account for your age or metabolic health. Now, what if I told you there was something even more powerful than changing what you eat? Something that can drop your blood sugar within hours and costs absolutely nothing? Number 1 is so simple it sounds too good to be true, but it's backed by decades of research and can literally reverse diabetes overnight in some cases. It's not a supplement, not a medication, not even a special food. It's movement, but not the kind your doctor probably recommended. This isn't about joining a gym or running marathons. This is about understanding how specific types of movement at specific times can act like medicine for your blood sugar. Here's what happens inside your body when you move strategically. Within minutes of starting physical activity, your muscles begin taking up glucose from your bloodstream without needing insulin. This is called non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake, and it's like having a secret door that bypasses your broken insulin system. The effect starts immediately and continues for hours after you stop moving. Even better, regular strategic movement makes your insulin work better even when you're at rest. The timing is everything. Most people exercise randomly throughout the week and wonder why it doesn't help their diabetes much. But research from diabetes centers shows that movement within 90 minutes after eating can reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes by 30 to 50%. Walking for just 10 to 15 minutes after each meal is more effective for blood sugar control than exercising for an hour every few days. But here's the part that will blow your mind. The type of movement matters more than intensity, especially for people over 60. High-intensity exercise can actually raise blood sugar temporarily due to stress hormone release. Low to moderate intensity movement, particularly walking and resistance exercises using body weight, provides the glucose-lowering benefits without the stress response that can backfire. Eleanor, 68, was a retired librarian from Michigan, whose blood sugar was averaging over 200 despite medication. She had been trying to exercise by going to senior aerobics classes twice a week, but her numbers weren't improving. We changed her approach completely. After each meal, she would walk around her neighborhood for 12 to 15 minutes at a comfortable pace. If weather was bad, she would march in place or walk up and down her stairs. Within 3 days, her post-meal blood sugar readings dropped from over 250 to under 180. Within 2 weeks, her morning readings went from over 200 to under 160. The key was consistency and timing, not intensity. Here's your movement protocol, and this is crucial for people over 60. Within 30 to 60 minutes after eating, move for 10 to 15 minutes. This can be walking, gentle stair climbing, marching in place, or simple bodyweight exercises like wall push-ups or chair stands. The pace should be comfortable enough that you can hold a conversation. If you feel breathless or your heart is pounding, you're working too hard. The goal is gentle, consistent movement that signals your muscles to take up glucose. For maximum effectiveness, combine this post-meal movement with morning movement before eating. A 5 to 10 minute walk first thing in the morning, even if it's just to the end of your driveway and back, helps prime your metabolism for better glucose control all day. This morning movement depletes any stored glucose in your liver and improves insulin sensitivity for hours. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it works immediately. You don't need to wait weeks or months to see results. After your very next meal, walk for 12 minutes and test your blood sugar 2 hours later. Compare it to a day when you eat the same meal but don't walk afterward. The difference will likely shock you. Most people see drops of 20 to 60 points just from this simple intervention. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When you combine strategic movement with time-restricted eating and proper protein timing, the effects multiply. Your body enters a state of improved metabolic flexibility, where it processes glucose more efficiently around the clock, not just after exercise. Let me share something that might change your entire perspective on diabetes. The medical system wants you to think of diabetes as a progressive disease that only gets worse with age. They focus on managing blood sugar rather than addressing why your blood sugar is high in the first place. But diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, is largely a disease of lifestyle and timing. When you fix the underlying causes, the symptoms often resolve rapidly. The 5 methods I've shared with you work because they address root causes, not just symptoms. Reducing blood sugar monitoring decreases stress. Adequate protein supports muscle function and glucose uptake. Time-restricted eating restores insulin sensitivity. Eliminating inflammatory foods reduces systemic inflammation. Strategic movement directly lowers blood sugar and improves insulin function. Together, they create a powerful synergy that can reverse years of metabolic damage in weeks or months. Think about this for a moment. Your body is incredibly resilient and adaptive, especially when you give it the right conditions. Every cell in your body is replaced regularly. Your entire digestive lining renews itself every few days. Your liver regenerates constantly. Even your muscle cells can improve their glucose handling capacity within days of changing your habits. The question isn't whether your body can heal. The question is whether you're creating the conditions for healing or for continued damage. Now, I want to address something important about medication. If you're currently taking diabetes medication, don't stop it without medical supervision. These methods can work so effectively that your blood sugar might drop too low if you don't adjust medication accordingly. Work with a doctor who understands metabolic healing, not just disease management. Many people find they can reduce or eliminate medication within months of implementing these changes, but it must be done safely with proper monitoring. Let me also be clear about expectations. While some people see dramatic improvements within days, others might take weeks or months to see significant changes. Age, how long you've had diabetes, other health conditions, and genetics all play a role in how quickly you respond. The key is consistency and patience. Small improvements compound over time into major transformations. Here's something else to consider. These methods work best when implemented together, not individually. You might see some improvement from just one change, but the real magic happens when you combine strategic eating timing with proper protein intake, inflammatory food elimination, stress reduction through less monitoring, and consistent post-meal movement. Each element supports the others. I also want to address a common concern I hear from people over 60. You might think you're too old to reverse diabetes, or that damage done over decades can't be undone. That's simply not true. Your body's ability to heal doesn't disappear with age, though it might work more slowly. I've seen people in their 70s and 80s make remarkable improvements in their glucose control and overall health by implementing these principles consistently. The research supports this optimism. Studies of people over 65 show that lifestyle interventions can be just as effective as in younger populations, sometimes more so because older adults often have more time to focus on health habits and fewer competing lifestyle demands. Retirement can actually be an advantage because you have more control over your eating schedule and movement patterns. Consider the long-term implications of taking control of your blood sugar now. Uncontrolled diabetes accelerates aging and increases your risk of heart disease, stroke, kidney failure, blindness, and dementia. But when you reverse insulin resistance and restore healthy glucose metabolism, you're not just managing diabetes. You're potentially adding years to your life and life to your years. You're reducing your risk of the complications that rob seniors of independence and quality of life. There's also an economic benefit that's rarely discussed. The average person with diabetes spends over $13,000 per year on medical care related to their condition. When you reverse diabetes through lifestyle changes, you dramatically reduce these costs. Money spent on quality food and perhaps some basic exercise equipment is a fraction of what you'll spend on medications, doctor visits, and eventual complications if the disease progresses. But perhaps most importantly, there's the psychological benefit of taking control. Instead of feeling like a victim of a progressive disease, you become the architect of your own healing. Instead of managing symptoms, you're addressing causes. Instead of accepting decline, you're creating improvement. This mindset shift is often as healing as the physical changes. Now let's talk about implementation, because knowing what to do and actually doing it are two different things. Start with the easiest change first, which for most people is the post-meal walking. After your very next meal, walk for 10 to 15 minutes. It requires no planning, no special equipment, and no major lifestyle change. Just walk. Do this for 3 days and monitor your blood sugar response. Once this becomes automatic, add the next easiest change. For most people, the second easiest change is adjusting protein intake. At your next grocery shopping trip, buy more eggs, chicken, fish, or other quality protein sources. Start having eggs for breakfast instead of cereal or toast. Make sure each meal has a palm-sized portion of protein. This usually requires minimal cooking skills and fits into most budgets and schedules. The third change to implement is time-restricted eating. Choose your eating window and stick to it for 1 week. Most people find that they naturally want to eat less frequently when they're getting adequate protein and eliminating blood sugar spikes through post-meal movement. The compressed eating window often happens automatically once the other habits are in place. Fourth, implement the 2-week elimination protocol I described. This requires more planning and preparation, but by this time you'll have built momentum from seeing improvements in your blood sugar from the first 3 changes. Use this elimination period to identify which foods are problematic for your individual metabolism. Finally, reduce your blood sugar monitoring to once per day, unless you're on insulin. This might be psychologically the hardest change because it requires trusting the process rather than obsessing over daily fluctuations. Remember, the goal is trending downward over weeks and months, not perfect numbers every day. Throughout this process, keep a simple log of your morning blood sugar, what you ate, when you ate, and how much you moved. Look for patterns rather than judging individual numbers. Celebrate small improvements and stay consistent even when progress seems slow. Healing happens in waves, not straight lines. Let me address some common obstacles you might encounter. First, family and social pressure. People around you might not understand why you're changing eating patterns that have been normal for decades. They might worry that you're being too restrictive or that you'll become obsessive about food. Explain that these aren't restrictions but strategic choices for healing. Most people will support you when they see your energy and health improve. Second, medical resistance. Some doctors are trained in disease management, not metabolic healing. If your doctor dismisses these approaches or insists that diabetes can only be managed, not reversed, consider finding a physician who understands functional or integrative medicine. You deserve medical support for healing, not just symptom management. Third, perfectionism. You don't need to implement these changes perfectly to see benefits. If you miss a post-meal walk, just do it after the next meal. If you eat outside your time window one day, get back on schedule the next day. Progress, not perfection, is the goal. Consistency over time matters more than never making mistakes. Fourth, social eating challenges. Family dinners, restaurants, and social gatherings can disrupt your new patterns. Plan ahead when possible. Eat a protein-rich snack before going to events where healthy options might be limited. Focus on the social aspects rather than the food. Most people won't even notice that you're eating differently if you don't make a big deal about it. Here's something that might help you stay motivated during challenging moments. Every time you choose healing behaviors over convenient ones, you're voting for the person you want to become. Every post-meal walk is a vote for energy and independence. Every properly timed protein meal is a vote for stable blood sugar and clear thinking. Every day within your eating window is a vote for metabolic healing. You're literally reshaping your cellular health with every small decision. Consider the ripple effects of your healing. When you reverse your diabetes, you become a model for other family members who might be struggling with similar issues. Your grown children see that aging doesn't have to mean inevitable decline. Your grandchildren learn healthy habits by watching your example. Your friends become curious about what you're doing differently. Your healing becomes part of a larger pattern of wellness that spreads to the people you care about. Think about what your life could look like 6 months from now if you implement these changes consistently. Imagine waking up with stable energy instead of blood sugar crashes. Picture yourself climbing stairs without getting winded, playing with grandchildren without fatigue, traveling without worrying about medication schedules or dietary restrictions. Envision your doctor's surprise when your lab results show dramatic improvement. Consider the confidence that comes from knowing you're actively healing rather than passively declining. The choice is yours, and you can start making it with your very next meal. Will you continue eating the foods that spike your blood sugar, or will you choose healing nutrition? Will you sit after eating, or will you take a healing walk? Will you eat from morning until evening, or will you give your insulin system time to reset? Will you obsess over daily blood sugar fluctuations, or will you focus on the behaviors that create lasting change? These might seem like small decisions, but they compound into profound transformations. The person who consistently makes healing choices becomes a different person metabolically, physically, and psychologically than the person who continues with disease-promoting habits. You get to choose which person you become. Remember, your body wants to heal. It's designed to maintain stable blood sugar, healthy weight, and abundant energy. When you remove the obstacles and provide the right conditions, healing happens naturally. You're not fighting against your body's nature. You're aligning with it. You're not managing a disease. You're restoring health. The medical establishment profits from your illness, not your wellness. The food industry profits from your cravings and addictions, not your satisfaction and health. But you profit from your healing in ways that can't be measured in dollars. You gain years of life, quality of relationships, independence in aging, and the deep satisfaction that comes from taking responsibility for your health. One final thought before we wrap up. If you've been dealing with diabetes for years, you might have accepted it as your new normal. You might have resigned yourself to progressive decline and increasing medication. But what if that story isn't true? What if your best years are still ahead of you? What if the energy and vitality you remember from younger days are still available? What if diabetes isn't a life sentence but a wake-up call? The methods I've shared with you have helped thousands of people over 60 not just manage their diabetes, but reverse it. They're not experimental or dangerous. They're based on fundamental principles of human metabolism that have been true for thousands of years, but forgotten in our modern rush toward pharmaceutical solutions. Your ancestors didn't have diabetes at the rates we see today because they naturally lived in ways that supported healthy glucose metabolism. You can reclaim that metabolic health starting today. The journey from diabetes back to metabolic health is like finding your way home. At first, the path might seem unfamiliar because you've been traveling in the wrong direction for years. But as you start making the right turns, things begin to feel more natural. Your body remembers how to process food efficiently. Your energy stabilizes. Your mood improves. You start to feel like yourself again, maybe better than you have in decades. So here's my question for you, and I'd love to see your answer in the comments. Which of these 5 diabetes reversing methods resonates most with you? And which one will you start implementing after your very next meal?